What is the value of a professional peer group for farmers? We're talking about peer groups for farming operations and the business side of such with Chris Barron in this episode of The Business of Agriculture. Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of The Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture. I got my old friend Chris Barron on here. You know him. He's been on multiple episodes. He's an Iowa guy. He's a farmer. He has a company called AgView Solutions. He has a podcast called AgView Pitch. I've been on it. And he also runs peer groups. And this is something that's growing a little bit. So I'm going to be speaking at his conference in January of 2025. We were talking the other day about these peer groups he puts on. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about that. So he's going to tell us about why people join these things, how it works, what value they get from it. Okay, let's face it, folks. The guy from Aim Point Research was on here 2 years ago on The Business of Agriculture, and he talked about, his name is Brett Scotto, and he said there's about 175,000 farming operations in the United States that do almost all the heavy lifting. Like 90% plus of all the revenue in agriculture is produced by these 170,000 farms. He thought, the research said 2 years ago, that might very much between now and about the year 2033 be down to about 60 to 65,000 farming operations. The point is, farming operations are continuing to consolidate, especially at the top where a lot of the production happens. If you are in one of those organizations, if you run one of those, it's a business, right? Just like the guys from Extreme Ag, they might have a couple dozen employees, they got all these acres to cover. Who do you turn to? Who are your peers that you can turn to actually get guidance or feedback or thoughts on your business? So that's kind of what Chris created. So how many of these do you have? How's it work? Why do they do it? All those questions.
Sounds like you got a lot of questions, Damian. That's good. I think we can answer most of them, hopefully, too. So I like to start out, Damian, with the why. Why would you want to get in a peer group? The operations that probably need it the most are probably the ones that are most sophisticated. They're the most complex. They're complicated. They're multi-generational. I think a lot of times what people think of when they think of a peer group is going to the coffee shop or just having a conversation, sitting around and having a few beers and talking about what's going on, and really not having a specific task or result that you want to get out of it, or a solution that could come from that group. And so we'll get into all that stuff, but I guess what I like to start with is the why. I think right now, as agriculture grows and we consolidate and there's less of us and we're larger, we're more sophisticated, they're multi-generational, community without competition is one of the reasons why. Because when you look at what we do is we compete with our neighbors. You're not going to tell your neighbor what your balance sheet looks like. You're not going to tell your neighbor what you're willing to pay for cash rent. You're not going to tell your neighbor what your feed efficiency looks like, or share any intimate issues that you're having with your family and the dynamics that are going on and the challenges and why some things aren't working with the son-in-law or the brother or the cousin. I think it's also the other why is, why would you get involved in a peer group with others that are similar to you, is a new perspective. We all get backyarditis. We all, as much as we try not to to see the same stuff. But we do, right? Every day we go back and we're in the same forest. And so we don't get out of our own forest to go look at a different one and say, wow, it's different over here. Maybe we should try this. Maybe we should try that. So that's another why. And the third why is accountability, because a lot of times we think of these things that we want to do.
Yep.
And then we get it on a list and we start it, and then we don't finish it. We don't follow through. We don't get the result that we should get if we were accountable for that. And sometimes we have internal accountability partners, but a lot of times we don't. And sometimes we let each other off the hook. And if you bring somebody in from the outside that's a peer, that's lived it, that's done it, that's had the same challenges, same opportunities, how did they do it? How'd they make it work? And can they help you follow through to get the solution and the result that you want? So those are kind of.
Why would you join a group? So I'm hearing this. First off, why would you join a group like this? You forgot the big one is obviously the overriding theme is to improve your business. You're a farming operation, and if you're listening to the Business of Agriculture podcast or watching my show here on YouTube and Acres TV, which I hope you are watching it because Chris Barron's a good looking guy. What the overriding theme is, this is a business. And, I say it all the time. It's cute. I just had this discussion yesterday with an ag guy I've known since I was a kid. Someone complained, I just wish that we were all family farms. We said these are family farms. Well, they're too big. He said, well, what would the right size be? These big farms. He's like, are 20 cows okay? Well, that'd be okay. What about 200? Oh, I don't know. This whole thing. The point is, these operations are going to continue to get larger. And they're a lot of capital with generally low margins. So you're talking about you need to run it very, very much like a business that also is maximizing all the returns that you can get. And that's what we're talking about here. So the overriding theme is you're improving your business. You just said it's community without competition. Yes. By the time you're a farmer of a certain size, the neighbor down the road resents you. It doesn't matter. Somebody down the road resents you. Whereas the peer group that you pair up somebody, I'm a farmer in Indiana, you pair me up with somebody that's a farm operator in Kansas, we're not competing. And we don't have, 50 years of hostility that our grandfathers told us we're supposed to have for these people. So I like that. But the accountability part of it is something that most people want to think about. If you don't have someone holding your feet to the fire, you may not do the things you say you're going to do.
Typically, you don't. I mean, eventually you do, but you don't do it with much efficiency and in a timely manner. And what we've seen are some massive changes. We've seen operations that, maybe a dairy that needs to make a $1 million investment, and they're just putting it off till they can quote unquote afford it. That's like saying, we're going to have kids when we can afford them. I mean, sometimes you have to take that risk and you have to take that leap, but sometimes you need somebody to give you that confidence or to follow up and say, hey, are you getting this done, and this done, so that you can do it.
Yep. And
a lot of times those things just get put off. And so having that outside voice and that relationship and that trusted, advisory board essentially is what the peers become, is an advisory board that give you the confidence and the follow through. And that's really the key for sure.
Okay. Who are you got how many of these peer groups? 5 of them, 4 of them?
So yeah, currently we are running 5. We've got interest in others. I mean, and we're not the only ones. I mean, this isn't a commercial for us to do peer groups. You can go online and you can find facilitators. I've seen in the past where operators or farmers have gotten together, 3 or 4 of them get together and they're like, let's just form our own peer group. Well, if you don't have somebody that's facilitating and organizing it from the outside, but maybe one of the farmers says they're the problem is they're not participating, they're facilitating, and it's impossible to do both effectively. But it's not effective. And so, and then, there's a lot to make sure that you hold the meetings a couple times a year, or it depends on the peer group. Some peer groups get together monthly, and we can explain kind of how our method works. It's tried and true. And it actually started out with Farm Journal a number of years ago, they started a program called TPEN, which was Top Producer Executive Network. And they discontinued that. And I was a facilitator for one group at that time. And that group decided to continue. And so I continued to be a facilitator for that group. And then we started getting people reaching out saying, hey, how do we get in a group like that? And so it just has kind of grown from there.
So you built the business out of it. And as you said, it's, four large-scale farm operations that want to improve their business could get together and do this on their own. But the problem is that they're going to say, well, I'm kind of busy right now. Oh, well, you know what? Maybe that week's not good. Whereas you do it, and it is a structured thing, period. This is the time we're going to get together. You're going to have these meetings because it only works if you're here.
You have to make a conscious effort to work on your business, not just in your business. And that's exactly what this does, is it creates an opportunity for these individual peers to get together. The way we do it is with 8 operations. We've found that that's the perfect number. You can do more, you can do less. And there's things that are successful with more or less, I'm sure. But our model has discovered that 8 operations from different states, so that they're far enough apart, there's no chance of them being in competition. We want to make sure that they understand when they commit to this group, they are committed. I think I told you offline before we started recording, you do not miss one of these meetings. I mean, if grandma dies the day you're leaving, I guess maybe you might be able to miss. But I mean, we schedule these meetings ahead of time, because we're in different parts of the country. One guy might be harvesting wheat and the other guy's planting soybeans, or, so we communicate at the meeting, and everybody gets their phones out, we get the calendar out, and we commit to each other on 3 days, twice a year, in the summer and in the wintertime. Winter meetings usually pretty easy. The summer meeting, it takes a little bit of navigating back and forth to get that date or those 3 days that, because we're all in different field work environments. And so, but it's also, sometimes it's good to be away from the business when there's a whole bunch of activity going on, because you can find out how good your team is real quick too. Do you have them properly trained so that you can get away? Because if you can't get away from your business, even when it's busy, how are you going to be a leader that can transition this business on to the next generation if you have to be there yourself every single day?
Yep.
And so, I mean, that's just a piece of it, I guess, that's super important.
Right. We got Brad Downing, who's going to enter the room. He's one of Chris Barron's peer group members, and we're going to hear from the farmer himself say, why does this work? How does it work? Et cetera, et cetera. Before we get Brad on here, I want to talk to you about premium plant nutrition. Premium plant nutrition with the added benefit of biostimulants. You've been hearing a lot about biologicals here in the last couple of years. I'm going to talk to you about a company called Redox. They've been around for 30 years. This is not some fly-by-night thing with investor money. Redox is a biostimulants company. So no one does it better than the Redox Bionutrients when it comes to plant nutrition with added benefit of biostimulants. A family business out of Burley, Idaho. I've been to their facility, their headquarters, that is helping growers succeed across the United States and internationally. Redox has a special pallet program. If you're a Midwest farmer, I want you to listen up. If you're a Midwest farmer, Redox has a pallet program for you, for corn, soybeans, wheat, providing breakthrough nitrogen optimization with a product called RDXN, in addition to 2 of their other flagship products, Banks and Mainstay SI. So basically, you get this pallet of this program, this pallet with these products. It's good enough to cover about 160 acres. You put it in there at time of planting, in furrow, or foliar, whatever that thing should be that fits your system. You can find out more about this at redoxgrows.com/Midwest. redoxgrows.com/Midwest to find out more about their pallet program. All right, so Brad Downing is a Howard County, Indiana farmer. He's about 45 miles from my farm here in Indiana, and he's one of the peer group members. So Chris said, let's bring him on. So, Brad, we already talked about the why you do this. It's community without competition. You got accountability. You've got the ability to look at other people's operations, get perspective. I think I heard it, backyarditis. The point is, you're a farming operation. You're a little bit insular. Sometimes you're insulated. And when you get together with a group like this, you hear from other people, and it kind of broadens your horizons. I think that's where we're going to start. Is that one of the biggest benefits? It would be, I would think.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits is the fact that you get so used to doing what you've always done, right? And you try to expand your mind, and you take all the information you've got from other people and bring it to you. Then all of a sudden you start connecting and having a network of guys that are way outside of your normalcy, right? And so you start actually seeing other operations for what they're doing in different areas, how they handle different situations, the challenges they have, the problems they have, and how they go about making those things, better or worse. And then what's interesting is I've always said, you never live long enough to make all the mistakes on your own, so you better learn from other people. Well, other people have made the same mistakes and you're getting ready to make, and it's nice to see them make them and you learn from them so you don't remake the same mistakes. So that's kind of one thing I've really gained out of the peer groups is it allows us to see things in a different light, but also see forward what we're trying to do. And maybe somebody else has tried to do that or a version of it. And how do we make it better versus just keep repeating the same thing over and over?
Question would be then, we've covered the why, now the who. Who is, if Chris and AgView Solutions have 4 of these peer groups, I think this is the way there's going to be more of this in the future. I think if you run your business the way you should as a producer, you're going to need all the kind of tools that you get from something like this. So who's in your peer group? Who are you? Who are you?
Who am I? Just this little farm outside of Indianapolis. So Cross Creek Ag Solutions and Cross Creek Farms started in 2014. I was about 15 years working for Beck's, and I started my farm. By name, I'm a 6th generation farm, but I left my family in 2014. My wife and I started over with 184 acres and built it from there. So that we incorporated in 2014 and started Cross Creek Farms. And then in 2017, I left Beck's and started Cross Creek Ag Solutions, which is our retail wholesale division of biological nutritionals, fertilizer, spreading. We're a Beck's seed dealer. We do consulting on the side, basically focused on soil and plant nutritional and biological above and below ground, and just trying to help farmers drive the highest ROI. Our farm has actually become our research center. So we have about 1,500 acres. We stretch from Cass County, Miami County, Grant County, Howard County, and Tipton County. So 5 counties we stretch, about 36 miles north to south and 26 miles east to west. And in
That's
doing that,
on farming or on your consulting work?
No, that's just in farming.
Okay.
That is just the farm itself. So the farm stretches that far into 5 counties. And the reason why we do that is 1,500 acres is really turned into our research farm. And we do it because we have about 18 different soil types we farm in that time frame, or in that span of acres there in miles. So it gives us a vast look at different things in different areas. But what's really interesting is it gives us a lot of repetition and a lot of different things we can do to help farms. And then, our farm obviously is continuing to grow, but that's where we've really taken the advice and the peer group that we've worked with and the people inside of that peer group and really try to figure out how do we make the farm, continue to be more profitable, but also, understanding that the key focus of what we do is the research side that fuels our Ag Solution business.
Chris, do most of your farming operations that are part of these peer groups have ancillary businesses as well, like an ag retail or, fabrication shop or some kind of thing like this, trucking?
I would say it's a blend. And so what we have is, we've got, equipment dealers that are farmers. We have crop protection, crop insurance, a lot of different, trucking, construction. There's a lot of the people that get in these peer groups are fairly complex operations. But I would also say at the same time, we see a lot of what you would call row crop or dairy operations or hog operations that get in these groups. And you might have blended in the same group an operation that's construction, trucking, farming, and next to a large dairy, and they're in the same group. Well, that diversification gives a clean perspective when one operation looks at another operation and asks some questions that might seem obvious, but they're not, right? Sometimes it's like, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, I don't know. We've always done it, and new ideas and new perspective and new thoughts and changes in the business that are quite effective to the bottom line. I mean, we've seen in peer groups that have matured, in other words, that we've been to all of the operations, financial bottom line changes that are not incremental, they're exponential. In other words, it's changed how they do business because of their peers. It's not because of us. It's not because of the facilitator. It's because the peers have come in and they've seen what's going on in that business and what could be changed. And then when the producer listens to peers rather than university experts or a consultant or a CPA or an attorney, they're listening to their peers. They're gonna take action because they see, more credibility from the peers than maybe they do, from that peer advisory board than maybe they would from a consultant or something too. So I think that's really where a big chunk of the value comes from.
Brad, how long have you been a member?
Let's see. I've known Chris since 2012, so I think this is our 5th year now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I believe this is our starting our new peer group. So we went through that whole entire process of the last 5 years, and then we're starting over for another group now. So I think it's been 5 years.
Yeah, and we haven't, Damian. We've got peer groups that we've had in the past where we put 8 operations together. They all go to each farm. Some of them want to go on for a while and do other stuff other than, as a group. But typically what we've seen with a couple of the groups, they've matured and they want new blood. We haven't had any operations that say, I'm done. They're like, I want to be in the next new peer group.
And what that means is you stick 8 of them together, and then they go to each other's operations and they do all that. And then at the end of a few years, 5 years, I guess is what Brad just said, then you like recycle them and say, now you're going to be in a different group. And the idea there is you're gleaning different information from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. And the group like Brad's going to be in, there are a couple of operations that he was with in a prior group, but they fit together better. And so that's one thing that, you want to be super careful of is when you get in a peer group, how is that peer group selected and why? In other words, I spend a ton of time being super conscientious about who we put together, and I interview these people and I talk to them and I get to know them and I get to understand what their objectives in business are. And I try to put those 8 operations that are going to get the most synergistic impact from each other, because you can just throw 8 large farm operations together and it might not work because their personalities might not jive. They may have different objectives or perspectives on things. And so we spend a lot of time making sure we get what we think is the right people together. I'm not perfect, so, we do our best, but we try to get these operations together so that they will get the most from each other. And so far it's been pretty successful. We might take 6 months or a year putting a group together of 8.
Mr. Downing, has it been successful for you? You're sticking with it. It must be a reason.
Yeah, there's one, I trust Chris and I trust the consulting side of what we do and what we do as a company. But the success part of it really comes down to the fact that it comes down to accountability. That's where the success comes in, because you can go to meetings and all the consulting all day long, but once you leave, the question is, what do you do with it? And so,
yeah.
Are you still there?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So the question being is, what do you do with it? And where do you go with it? And the accountability is so important. So case in point, I can go back 2.5 years ago when we had our peer group at our place and had our whole entire team go through their SWOT analysis of our operation. And they left us with about 16 action items we needed to do. And in the next 6 months, we had all of them done except for one. And the biggest one was the one I was fearful, and why this is so successful is I just didn't want to spend the money. As our growing business was expanding, our farm's expanding, we needed to build an office, and a very large office, to accommodate our growth and where we're at now. And I was very hesitant, saying just a lot of money when you start putting the kind of office that we need. And so the peer group basically started looking at it and saying, you can't afford not to, and started putting the numbers to it and presenting the numbers to me and saying, okay, what if you don't have this office and you don't build this space, what are you limiting your business to? And then literally about a month after they left, we started the process, and it wasn't more than 12 months later, we were moved in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a game changer for us.
That's a good story. The person that's listening to this, remember, there's always the naysayer. Yeah, well, that might work for them, but I'm not going to do this. the reality that you're saying here is sometimes it's not just a bunch of people to pressure you to go out and spend more money. They actually broke it down on a business to business basis and said, here's exactly why this makes sense.
Right. I mean, we had been with that group now 2.5 years, and we'd been to, I think, 4 or 5 operations. I think we were the fifth. I think we were the fifth one in the group out of 8 to go. And so we went to other places, which for me, that was good to see other people before they came to us, because we weren't ready at that point in time. But yeah, the naysayer may say, okay, these groups are going to get together and they're going to push everybody to spend more money. And honestly, yes, on some aspects you need to, and they're going to present the reasons why. Mm-hmm. But I won't name who it is, but another person in our peer group, the whole premise was looking at capital expenditures for them and holding them accountable to not spend money, to figure out how to be more profitable and more economical in what they were doing. And so on the flip side is, if you're an operation that is overextended and your group comes to you and is like, hey, you got to figure out how to make this work and let us show you what we think can help. Well, then, yeah, my accountability to them was, I was calling them once a month saying, what's your capital expenditure? What are you doing? Trying to hold them accountable, saying, where are you going with this? So how do we help you?
Mm-hmm. He ratcheted their spending back in. He became their de facto Dave Ramsey. All right. Barron, what do you got?
Well, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is just give you a real quick rundown of kind of what our system is. It doesn't mean it's the absolute system, but it would give some perspective for people to think about, okay, well, how does this work? Okay, if I'm going to get in one, what's it look like?
I want to hear all about it. Before I do that, I want to tell our listeners about Truterra. Truterra, as you know, has been a business partner here with the Business of Agriculture. And a year like this, with commodity prices being down, what if you could diversify revenue and make money for doing some things a little differently? Maybe you're already doing these things. So we're talking about no-till, reduce the tillage. You can actually till light vertical tillage and still qualify for some of these Truterra sustainability programs, strip till, also maybe a reduction of inputs. There's ways that you could get into a sustainability program. You've heard these, maybe you don't fully understand them. You can learn more by going to TruterraAg.com. Truterra is a part of Land O'Lakes. You know about them. They've been around for 100 years. Truterra is helping farmers navigate their journey into regenerative practices that actually pay. We're talking about agronomic and economic and environmental sustainability for your farming operation. TruterraAg.com. Go to TruterraAg.com. How's it work?
All right. So basically what we do is we put together 2 meetings a year. When we first start with a group, we select a host operation. Typically, it's going to be an operation that's never hosted before. Doesn't have to be, but, you know, like the group Brad's going to be in. There's, I think, 5 or 6 operations in that peer group that have never hosted. We've already selected, Brad doesn't know this, we've already selected the host operation. And so that operation, then everybody comes in. Well, actually, let me back up. What we do is we send out an onboarding form to start with. So if somebody's interested, we send out an onboarding form. They fill it out of all about their operation, their financials, not in detail, but, you know, their operation, what it is, acres, livestock, whatever's in their businesses that they have. And then we select from there. Once we get the group put together, we send out those onboarding forms to those 8 operations so that they can all see each other. And then that's the final blessing. They can all look at that and say, yep, I'm 1,000% in now because I get to see these other operations. Once that decision is made, we give them dates. We give about 5 different dates of 3 days in a row. Once those dates are set, everybody agrees, then that first operation host, we show up typically on the first day, and it can be any day of the week, but it's 3 days in a row. We show up about 2:00 in the afternoon and we do updates. Updates are all the farm operations except for the host operation. So they give 20 minutes of what's going on in their business. If it's the first meeting, it's an introduction, right? It's telling, you know, this is what's going on. The host operation then provides a social and a dinner that evening. The host operation pays for all that. Everybody shows up, and sometimes it's in their shop, sometimes it's at a hotel, sometimes it's somewhere in their, you know, some have conference rooms, whatever. Doesn't really matter, but we have that social. The next morning, the host operation then will do a presentation of which we help them with. They put a PowerPoint presentation together with where their farm has been historically, where it is now, and where would they like it to go. In addition to that, there's typically 2 or 3 things that are either pain points or opportunities that they want to share with the peers so that the peers know where they want to go with that meeting for the next day and a half. Okay, so once that's established, we take That's in the morning. Then we take a physical tour. We go out, we look at the physical part of the business, and then we come back in, we have lunch, and then we kick the host operation out. At that point, we have already pre-selected people that will be interviewed to learn about the operation. So it might be, the peers might be interviewing their lender, maybe their CPA, maybe an employee, maybe a landowner, maybe 2 or 3 family members that farm with the leader of that's in the peer group, but they're family members or whatever. It sort of depends on what it is that they want to have accomplished. And so for some operations, like Brad said, it might be a financial need. For others, it might be a transitional need. Like, we want to transition this over to the next generation. What do we do? Are we doing this right? Are there things that we should be thinking about differently? So everybody has something different. So we interview anywhere from, 5 to maybe 10 people to have the peers understand what's going on throughout that second day. Towards the end of that day at about 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, somewhere in there, we wrap up the interviews and we start the SWOT analysis, where we put together strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As the facilitator, we put that up on a big screen and we start populating that. Each peer will say that they'll, like, somebody will stand up and say, I'll do strengths. Another one will do weaknesses, one opportunities, one threats. And they're going to be the ones that are going to present the next day. And so we pre-select of the peers who's going to present to that host operation. And as a group, they start working on that SWOT. That evening, we shut it down about 6 o'clock. We'll have another social, another nice dinner at a restaurant or something where we can all network. We usually invite whoever was interviewed in that day, because sometimes everybody sits down, they have a beer and they start talking. There's questions that didn't get asked in the interview that they either forgot to ask or were afraid to ask in front of everybody. So they're having a beer, people get loosened up, and you start learning the real stuff that's going on, right? So everybody is pretty informed on what's going on really in that operation, because you want that operation to be as vulnerable as possible. And so the next morning, then early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, we'll have breakfast, and the peers will get together again without the host operation, and they finish up the SWOT. They go through the whole thing again: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. They have a list of each of those categories. Then the most important part is they put together the accountability portion, which is recommendations and action items that come from the peers.
Chris, it seems like it's a to-do list. Poor Brad got 16 things on his list that he had to do.
Yep. Some get 10, some get 20, some get in between there.
Brad, did you get them? You said you got all 16 of them done?
We do now. They're all completed now.
You know what? I want the AgView Solutions peer group to help me out. I couldn't get him to show up on time for the podcast recording, and they got him to do 16 punch list items in a few months' time. So I'm impressed.
That's because you're an individual. You're just one.
Again, you don't need to sell me. I'm impressed. I already see the value of the AgView Solutions peer group model.
Yeah. So, but let me finish up there. The last thing I would say is that accountability piece is critical. So what will happen is, let's say like on Brad's, they said, okay, you got to build the office. Well, and I don't know who it was, Brad, we don't have to say a name, but one of the peers said, I'll be accountable to help follow through, help make the phone calls and say, how's it coming? Are you coming along with it? Are you getting this done? Those are the things that we do in every peer group now. And it took us a while to learn that you have to have an accountability partner for each one of those things, because some of the operations, as good as they are and as good as the peers are, you still need an accountability partner that can kind of stay on your butt to make sure you get it done. And so that's a really big thing. And then the very last thing we do at the end of the meeting is we do takeaways. And the takeaways are mainly for when you go home, what did you learn here that you're going to take home and change in your business that's going to impact your bottom line or change your life, the quality of your life? Because that's why we're doing this. Just because you're at another operation doesn't mean you aren't taking something home that's going to change your life, change your business, change your operation. And so that's the real purpose of it, because, hosting, you learn a ton and you're under a lot of pressure. But when you get these opportunities to go see these other farm operations and you get to come home, you better damn well come home with something that is going to change your business, or why are you doing it, right? And so we do those takeaways so that everybody can be committed. And the last thing I want to say is these things can be emotional, right, Brad? I mean,
Yeah,
how much time?
you're getting pretty personal. You get, there's a business and the money aspect, but let's be honest, you talk about the quality of life. I mean, that's a big thing with my wife and I, and she's the vice president of our company. It does get pretty emotional because you also learn about the real world, real life situation, and you're deeply invested in just not their business, in their life.
Right. And, you know, I mean, we jokingly say if there wasn't tears, we didn't do our job. Right. Literally, almost every operation. I remember a dad of one of the guys that was in Brad's peer group called me right after his son had signed up for the peer group and kind of chewed me out and said, how much money is my son going to spend doing this and probably not get anything out of it? He's like, I don't understand the investment part of this. Why would he be paying to do this? And I said, well, he doesn't have to do it. That's fine. You know, he's like, no, he's going to do it. I can't tell him the difference, whatever. Well, when they hosted and we did takeaways, the dad couldn't speak, literally couldn't speak, because he was so emotionally unbelievable that these 7 operations came from all these other states far away, cared about their farm, cared about their business, and wanted to make a change for them. He couldn't believe it. He's like, I just can't believe that these people would come here and be here for us as people, not as a business, but literally because they care. And so that's the other part of it that you can't explain, you can only experience.
Well, I'm surprised to hear that an older generation agricultural person was closed-minded and unaccepting of doing something new that also might spend money that would advance their business. That is something I've never heard before.
Yeah,
a backward ass, non-forward thinking, non-business minded agricultural person from an older generation. I've never heard of such a thing. Good God.
Yep, exactly.
Brad, talk to me then. You're stuck with it. You're not doing this just because you're buddies with Mr. Barron. You're doing this because it's helping your business. So you went from 184 acres to now you're farming a lot more acres, and you've got part of it is a research farm, and you've got the agricultural retail and consulting, agronomic consulting thing. How much of this it was going to happen with or without Barron, but there's it's that shot in the arm. It's that thing in the back of the mind. I mean, kind of take me there, you know? Right. There's certain things that you do in your business that advance you along. And then there's also outside influences that kind of accelerate it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure. I mean, we're driven people. We're going to make this happen either way. And we're deeply invested in making sure, you know, we're bringing the right thing to the farmer on their ag solution side from the retail business and the wholesale business. But what happened when we're inside the peer group, like why it is accelerated? Well, we kind of went through a lot of the accountability and the ideas and seeing things and different mistakes and different ideas. But I mean, there's out of the 8 people we had in the peer group, I think there's 5 of them we have commerce and business we're doing with now. One of them became a dealer up Cross Creek. So it's meeting different people, but it's the network, and it's their network is bigger. You know, it just keeps expanding your network and more people. And then on top of that, even if you're not in the retail, but you're just in the farm business and all you're doing is farming, and part of these peer groups, why is it successful and what's it matter? Case in point, I mean, we bought one of our people in our group. We were looking for equipment. They own an equipment company up in North Dakota. We called them and said, hey, we need this piece of equipment. Can you get this for us? And literally they could get it to us and ship it to us for cheaper than what we could buy it here locally. And so it just a network piece of that. And I'd say it did accelerate what we're doing, because we're gonna make this happen irregardless, right? But it was a fact of the matter of some of the things that you're scared about taking that leap from, people are gonna help push you off that end and say, go ahead. And when you do start drowning, they're still standing there on the shore throwing you a life preserver. They may be laughing at you, but they're gonna still throw a life preserver out to help you. And so they're invested, and we're invested in helping them get to where they want to go. And that's part of it.
Well, the truth is they're not vested. It's your money. But, you know, you can say the same thing about a hired consultant. I mean, obviously Barron does hired consulting work, whatever. Well, that's always been the knock on them. Like, well, where's your skin in the game? You know, so I think that that's not as a valid an argument. I think this grows. You know, we've got the evolution of production agriculture. We've got the consolidation of production agriculture. I just think that this grows because of all the things that we see happening here.
Well, Damian, there's one big thing right there you just said. That my opinion is you talk about there's agriculture and modern agriculture where we're going. There's collaboration and consolidation, and you choose which one you want to have because that's where it's heading. And I look at it from the standpoint of my father's and grandfather's generation that are either exited or getting ready to exit. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s. The only way we survive and continue to grow is to collaborate. I mean, we can consolidate all we want, but I don't have the backing, the money, and the inheritance to turn around and consolidate a bunch of farms. So I look at it, we got to collaborate with a lot of people. And whether that be collaborate on equipment, labor, whatever it may be, to make them more successful, make us more successful, and figure out how do we make this thing work over time with collaborations. And I can name, just like every farmer out there, you can name 15 people you don't want to collaborate with, but it's hard to find the 2 or 3 that you do want to.
Yeah. Well, that's where the onboarding thing that Chris talks about, I think, is pretty important. What about the investment? You talked about the guy that called you up and thought it was ridiculous. There's an investment of the time, which again, we all know farm people. There's the types that are going to say, "Oh, I don't have time for that." I got to say, but the business-minded farming operation says, this is an investment of my time. I get smarter and I improve my business by going and seeing and learning and experiencing and collaborating, to use Brad's word. What's the investment of time total for the year? About a week's time, right?
Yeah, it ends up being about probably 6 days out of the year, because you'll have a travel day. And in some cases, we have our groups. We've got one group that's got an operation in Washington State, and they're on the other side of the country. So, there's extra travel for some of the groups because they're Brad's new group. There's a Pennsylvania operation, and there's a Tennessee. I mean, they're kind of scattered all over the place, and so there is some travel time. But that travel time, I think, is pretty valuable. I mean, Brad can probably attest to this, but, when you leave the peer group, you talk about it for a day, all the stuff you learned, and, because you're drinking information through a fire hose and you're thinking about how it impacts your business and how that's similar to you and how do you apply what you just learned. And so what we encourage people to do is don't just go by yourself. Like if you're the operator that makes all the decisions, who's the influencer? It might be your spouse. It might be 2 or 3 other business people in the operation that need to go, because when you come home from that peer group, you're going to have about 15 new ideas. Yeah. And everybody's going to look at you like, where the hell did you come up with this? And if they can be there to hear and experience the same thing, then when everybody goes home, that travel back is really valuable, I think, because you're digesting and metabolizing all of the learning.
What's the investment of money? The investment of 6 days a week, 6 days a year, and probably there's more than that, because these guys are on, they become friends. So I'm sure that there's a time when Brad reaches out to somebody in the network and says, "Hey, I just found out about this thing. Can you help me?" I mean, there's some of that. You communicate with them besides the 6 days, right?
Yeah. Sorry. No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 6 days or 7 days, like Chris said, of actual hard time in it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say out of the 8 farms that we had, I've communicated with all of them, each of them during the year, but there's probably 4 or 5 that there's not more than a week or 2 weeks. We don't go by talking no matter what. Yeah,
because a couple of them, there's a little bit more of a gel there. There's something that they've got some similarities or whatnot. What's the investment of money, Mr. Barron? How much am I paying if I join one of your peer groups?
Yeah, so good question. So it's right at about $8,000 a year. We put, like I said, the biggest part of the hardest part for us is getting the group put together. And then once the group is together, then we help the host operation. So we spend a couple of days, and I should say I should give Alyssa credit. She's the one that does all the work. She lines up hotels, lines up all of the travel, make sure there's communication. She puts the agendas together. She makes sure we follow the agendas. We put we keep all the notes. We put the PowerPoint presentation together, make sure that everybody's communicating and staying connected. One thing I would say, Brad talked about the communication between them too. One of the things that we see a lot is I almost have to get out of the texting, because these groups, and each one has a different culture, but we've got 2 groups right now that they're communicating nonstop. Yeah. And so I had to get out of it, because like this year as we record, guys are having trouble getting planting done and stuff because it's been wet. They're like nonstop. So I had to get out of the group because it was just nonstop communication. And, and some groups don't communicate until they get together. But the minute they get together, they're hugging and they're best friends, So every group kind of has its own sort of culture too that we've learned. And it just and there's no right or wrong.
I think we're going to let Brad get the last word here. Kind of titling this "The Power or the Value of a Professional Peer Group for Farming or even Agricultural Operations." Again, I see when we talk about where things go in the evolution, there's people who are going to get left behind. And it's not because some big bad farmer took advantage of it. It's because they don't want to evolve. They don't want it to grow. And growth doesn't mean acres necessarily. Growth can mean profit margin. Growth can mean in educational, right? Growth can mean I become a better operator. I maximize my resources more. There's a lot of, this is where I think because I am a small insulated business person like you. And so I kind of see this like, I would like it if I had 8 people like me that we get together and do all this sort of thing. I see it growing. Am I right?
Yeah, no question. I mean, it has to. And it's not because you want to drive it or the fact of the matter of wanting to do it, whether it's Chris wanting to do it or someone else wanting to do it on the peer group side of things. The fact of the matter is, when you were only farming 200-300 acres and you could go to the coffee shop and talk to all your friends that everybody got along, 50, 60 years ago and get all the information, that was your internet and information about what guys are doing different in your local area. Today, that doesn't mean we're a global economy or a global scale. I mean, everything I was on our phone, and I can give my 13-year-old a phone and she's going to learn more in one day than I learned in the last 30 years about things. And so when you start looking at peer groups and people like that, you've got to get more mindset put together to grow. And it doesn't mean acres. It doesn't mean profitability. It could be anything of that. Yep. But if you're not in the mindset of wanting to grow, then you're dead. You just don't know it.
Yeah, well, stagnation is slow death. My friend Rob Syke has a group like this. He's an agricultural entrepreneur, and he runs peer groups, mostly more the prairie provinces because he's a Canadian guy. But this is a model that I know at least a couple people, Chris Barron and Rob, that put these together. Also, I don't want to correct Brad, but he just said 50 or 60 years ago, the farmers got together and all got along. Okay, maybe it's because you're younger than me. I don't remember a time when farmers all got along. It doesn't matter how many acres they farmed or how many pigs they fed or didn't feed. Am I right, Chris? I think he's got a little bit of rose-colored lenses about farmers getting along.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had at TPAP, I heard one of the instructors saying that he went with his grandpa to the coffee shop and they had to stay till like 1:00 in the afternoon. And he's like, we've been here all day and we're just leaving now. And he said, well, yeah, you got to be the last one to leave. Otherwise they talk about you. So, and
there's no question about it.
The coffee shop thing is not the place to learn and being vulnerable, being open, being honest, being accountable, being there for each other, being a friend, and again, caring about each other. That's the key.
His name's Chris Barron. The company's called AgView Solutions. They do peer groups. If you are a forward-thinking farming operation that wants to take it to the next level, you might consider hopping in on the next peer group. They've already got 4. He's been approached about putting together a 5th. You already heard what it costs. You heard about the investment of time. This is not the kind of thing that if you're the reluctant, resistant, questioning person, it's probably not for you. The other guest on here is Brad Downing. He's got a company called Cross Creek Ag Solutions. Cross Creek Ag Solutions, not too far from where I'm sitting right now. Remember also a company called Truterra. If you want to sign up for a sustainability program or just learn more about it, go to truterraag.com. And then also, if you want to start dabbling into using biostimulants to maximize your nitrogen resource, which you're going to probably eventually be legislated into doing, you might check out what Redas can do for you. They got a Midwest corn, soybean, or wheat program right now, a special pallet program if you're a Midwest farmer. Go to redasgrows.com/Midwest to learn more about that. Till next time, he's Brad, he's Chris, I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Well, that concludes another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. This episode was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You know, everybody in agriculture understands the importance of soil health. We also keep an eye on our soil better than we ever did through advanced soil testing. But what if there was a company that provided predictive analytics, not just checking out nutrients and all the elements that are in there, but also could tell you the degree of risk you face with disease and pest pressure? That's right, Pattern Ag can do that. They actually can tell you, hey, you're going to have a real issue here. You can preemptively, proactively treat for corn rootworm or cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome before the problem actually starts costing you yield. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to find the nearest rep that can help you start doing better for your soil.